DraftSharks.com, we pride ourselves on having the most accurate rankings in the industry. That's why we put 3 guys among the top 10 in the Fantasy Pros accuracy competition for 2022. It's why our projections guru, Jared Smola, is number 1 among everybody for 3-year running accuracy. But just because we care so much about our rankings doesn't mean we're stubborn and leave the numbers where they are. That's why you'll find guys rising and falling up our rankings with camp happenings, with injuries, with info we get from watching the preseason games. And that's why today I'm going to bring you some of the recent risers and fallers in our 2023 fantasy football rankings. I'm going to start in the Miami backfield, where Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert have actually been fairly high in our rankings versus the market throughout the offseason so far. Well, they got bumps up this week because, first of all, Dalvin Cook chose to sign with the Jets instead. That has been a concern for the Miami backfield until the Dalvin Cook to the Jets news, because Miami was rumored to be one of the top potential landing spots. No Dalvin Cook means more touches available for Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. And then on top of that, more recently, Devon Achane's dealing with a shoulder injury. Now, as I speak, we're waiting to see just how serious that is, but any injury to the rookie is only going to help the cases for the veterans who have been going much later in your draft than they should have so far. Let's take a look at the Draft Sharks rankings right now, and you can see Jeff Wilson's already been inside the top 45. Raheem Mostert is right behind him in the rankings, especially if you're drafting best ball teams. Those guys have been values all offseason and continue to be now, with maybe even more upside than they had to begin with. Number 2 on today's list is Justice Hill of the Ravens. And honestly, when I saw Jared moving Justice Hill up and talking about some buzz with him, I was a little surprised. But the case for Justice Hill is that he worked ahead of Gus Edwards in the preseason opener, which seems to put him in good standing to become the number 2 running back for the Ravens heading into the regular season. We're going to see game 2 of the preseason for the Ravens on Monday night, so we'll see if anything changes on that front. But just that Justice Hill has a chance to beat out Gus Edwards for that spot should make him somebody that you mix into your best ball plans right now, because Justice Hill has been basically going undrafted. I know I've mixed in Justice Hill more over the past week and a half in my best ball drafting. I would recommend going ahead and do some of that. Number 3, Deonte Harty of the Buffalo Bills. Same kind of case as with Justice Hill. We don't know for sure yet what Harty's standing is going to be heading into the regular season, but preseason indications so far point to him being ahead of Khalil Shakir and other competitors for that number 3 wide receiver role in Buffalo. Now, the number 3 wide receiver for the Bills is probably not going to get enough week-to-week work in season to be somebody that you start in most lineup-setting leagues. But that offense is sure to score plenty of points, and that's the kind of player that we want to have deep on our best ball rosters, mixing in when he does have a big week. Deonte Harty already signed a decent-sized contract, surprising at the time for how much it paid him over 2 years, and he's already showed us game-breaking speed with the Saints, where he first emerged as a return man. If we can get a guy with return man speed and skills in a Buffalo offense with Josh Allen's arm, there's going to be at least a big week or 2 mixed in, so that's going to be nice at the bottom of our best ball rosters. We'll close out the risers with a couple of tight ends, and the first is rookie Luke Musgrave for the Packers. He's been generating buzz basically ever since he took the field with Green Bay after arriving in the second round. He's playing like a full-timer in the preseason. He is moving up in ADP, but not yet to the point where you need to worry about skipping Luke Musgrave. Now, if we get to lineup setting leagues, I'm not pushing Luke Musgrave to be your starter at that level, but he's somebody that you could stash late in that draft as a tight end too, if it's a deep enough roster for that kind of player to make sense. And we'll see what he turns to in the regular season. Maybe he does become somebody that we're able to use. For now, he's a late upside guy, especially for best ball drafts. The last one in the risers section honestly makes me a little bit sad, and not because I have anything against Adam Troutman, the tight end for the Broncos. He's working as the starter. He worked as the tight end 1 at the beginning of the preseason for the Broncos, and that means less work for Greg Dulcich. And that's the part that makes me sad. So we'll transition from risers to fallers, because with Adam Troutman gaining some ground, and I'm not talking about serious ground, you'll have to scroll way down the tight end rankings if you want to see Adam Troutman. But you're also going to see Greg Dulcich fall down a little bit, and that's because we've been hoping he was going to be the number 1 tight end for these Broncos. He got some positive talk from Sean Payton leading into training camp, but if Greg Dulcich is not the clear number 1 tight end in this offense, it's going to be tough to like him as a fantasy starter. I've been moving him out of my best ball drafting a little bit lately because I did have a good bit of him before. I'm not giving up on Greg Dulcich for this season. I still think he outperforms Adam Troutman as a receiver, but it's a fairly crowded offense, and it might be that we don't want either of these guys on our lineup setting teams. Others on the fallers side, Roschon Johnson for the Bears. Now, this one's a little bit touchy. He's coming off a pretty good performance in the second preseason game for the Bears. But for the second straight week, he has worked behind the veterans with him in that Chicago backfield. Khalil Herbert operated as the clear number one in the first preseason game. Then he was held out of the second one, which is another indication that he leads that depth chart. Deonte Foreman played in that second game ahead of Roschon Johnson. I think Roschon Johnson is the higher upside player and probably the player I would rather draft at their relative costs still. But we have to bring Roschon Johnson down in the projections a little bit on the risk that he does enter the season as the number 3 running back in Chicago. Ultimately, I don't think it's a terrific spot for running back value with Justin Fields taking on plenty of the rushing stuff, including some rushing touchdowns, and with an offense that I don't think is going to be spectacular. Should be better than last year. Maybe we get some more touchdowns overall. Maybe that helps the situation for all the running backs, but still not an awesome spot for either running back rushing scores or running back targets. So not excited about any Bears running back. Bring in Roschon Johnson down a little bit. There's still room for him to rebound ahead of the regular season and climb that depth chart, but I'm going to go ahead and bet that he's at least not the starter heading into the regular season. Malik Davis is somebody who has moved down some. Most recently, we saw the Athletics' John Machota leave Malik Davis out of his projected 53-man roster. Now, obviously, that's just a projection. We'll see what actually happens with the Cowboys, but that's reason enough to back off drafting Malik Davis for now, because he's no guarantee for anything even if he does make the roster, and it's always been a muddled situation. Meanwhile, Deuce Vaughn has seemed to do nothing but sparkle when he gets the ball. Now, maybe we're just getting the highlights on video and maybe we're not seeing the other stuff, but when you have an exciting back in Tony Pollard, you have an exciting rookie in Deuce Vaughn, it doesn't really matter what the other guys are doing because Malik Davis, even if he makes that roster, is in for limited opportunities. We'll also see if the Dallas Cowboys add a running back before the regular season, but in any event, Malik Davis is not somebody that really makes a whole lot of sense, even for deep spots on best ball rosters right now. Finally, Treylon Burks is kind of a necessary drop down the projections. You're probably hearing that one and saying, yeah, duh, Treylon Burks moved down because he suffered a knee injury. Obviously, when a guy suffers a knee injury in practice that's expected to keep him out for a few weeks, then we have to lower the projections on him and consider him a bigger risk heading into the season. Now, we're going to end this with a positive note on Treylon Burks because he was already going in wide receiver 4 range since the arrival of DeAndre Hopkins. The knee injury is only going to push him further down than that. So if you're stashing Treylon Burks on your roster as either a deep wide receiver 4 or maybe even a wide receiver 5, he remains an upside guy. Like I said, the knee injury still carries risk into the regular season. Maybe he's somebody that doesn't quite get it going enough for us to actually start him in lineup setting leagues. But if Treylon Burks does fully recover from that, with plenty of time left in the regular season, there is room for him to be the breakout wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. Again, if you're stashing him as a reserve, there's little risk to taking a shot. And let's just hope that he keeps falling down the rankings as we get closer to the season. People are drafting their most serious teams, and they're scared about a guy that's not on the field. In that case, stash Burks on the bench, and let's see what happens. And speaking of seeing what happens, we'll tell you exactly who's rising up and falling down our rankings every week with this article that comes out at the end of every week, right up until the regular season. So you'll know that your rankings are up to date in your draft war room. You will know that we're paying attention to all the things going on. You'll know that we're not being stubborn with our rankings. We're moving guys around as we see fit, trying to make sure that your team is ready to dominate the draft and win your league.